In this video, you'll learn how to create a detailed callout view from a larger section view. You'll see how to modify the view properties to prepare it for detailing, and you'll learn how to load and place detail components, add filled regions and detail lines to complete the detail. A detail callout is an enlarged view showing an area of another view, such as a plan or section. This view then has further detail added using 2D components to enhance the 3D model in the detailed view. I have the exercise file detail section open, and we're currently looking at the key section view which cuts through the entire building. We need to make a detail of the floor junction here at the top of the basement, and to do this we'll go to the View ribbon tab, and from the Create panel I'll click the Callout tool. Now we need to draw a rectangle around the area for the detail, so we'll click here just outside the basement and we'll go diagonally across to cover the area that we need for the detail. And we can see that marker's placed, and looking at the project browser in the sections group here, we can see we now have the key section callout 1, which is the view that we've just created. Before I open the view, I'll select the callout marker here, and we can just use the drag controls to reposition the tag to a more suitable location. So now I'll go to the properties palette, and from the type selector here, we'll change the view type to be a detail view instead of a building section view. And going back to the project browser, we can see we now have the detail views group, and our callout view is in that group. So now I'll open up the callout view, and we can see that it covers just that area of where the first floor meets the basement and near the site. Now, before we place any detail, we first need to prepare the view. So to begin with, we'll change its scale. So looking at the view control bar here, we can currently see it set to be 1/2 inch equals 1 foot. And we'll click on and change this to be 1 inch equals 1 foot. Next we can see the level markers here, and we don't really want to see those in this detail, so I'll select one of these. And now from the right click menu, we'll go to the Hide in View submenu here and choose Category to turn off both of those. And next, looking at the topography, we can see that this has a solid fill on it. So we'll also hide this and replace it with our own fill in the detail. So I'll select the topo surface, and from the right click menu, we'll choose Override Graphics in View. And now from the submenu here, we'll choose by category. And now in the settings, we can uncheck the cut patterns, so foreground and background, so that they're no longer visible. And now we'll click OK. And if I just click off now, we can see that that pattern has been hidden in the view. So now we're ready to add some detail in. And we can see that the model doesn't show any junctions at the moment, so there are no fixings. And the floor here will be a timber floor, so we'll need to place a wall plate and some joists, and also some plywood for the flooring itself. We'll need to show some timber studs and insulation in this wall, plus some plywood sheathing and wood siding for the external finish. And the finished detail should look like the image that's currently on the screen. So we'll start by placing the wall plate at the top of the retaining wall just here. But before we can do this, we need to load in the detail component for the cut lumber that we need to use. So to do this, we'll go to the Insert ribbon tab, and from the Load from Library panel here, we'll click Load Autodesk Family. And this will open up the cloud-based Autodesk content browser. And we just need to check the locale settings that the region is set to be United States Imperial. And having done that, we'll now search for lumber. And from the results here, we'll choose the nominal cut lumber section component, and then we'll click Load to download this into our project. Now this family has a type catalog, so we can actually choose the types that we need. So rather than load all of these in, we can pick specific ones. And I'll select the 2x4 type, and then a bit further down, using the control key, I'll also select the 3x8 type. And then we can click OK, and those two types will be loaded into our project. So now to place it, we'll go to the Annotate ribbon tab, and from the Detail panel here, we'll click the Component tool to place a detail component. And looking at the type selector, we can see we've got the 2x4 cut lumber section. So we'll change this to be the 3x8 type. And now in the view here, we can see we have that component. We need it rotated, so I'll use the spacebar on the keyboard, which will rotate that around. and now we can just place it, snap into the top of the retaining wall here. We need it aligned to the outside edge of the floor, so from the Modify ribbon tab here we'll click the Align tool, and then I'll click the end of the floor as the reference, and then the end of the lumber here to align to that reference. So I'll click Modify just to finish the Align tool. And now we need to place the joist on top of the wall plate. And we're going to use the same component, so I'll select the wall plate, and from the Modify ribbon tab here, I'll click Create Similar, and we can see now we have the same detail component available for us to place. And we just need to snap it into the corner of the wall plate here, and then we have that joist in its correct location. We also need to place an anchor bolt through the wall plate into the wall itself. So we'll go back to the type selector and we'll pick the anchor bolt type. We can see that on the cursor now, so we just zoom in a little and snap to the middle of the wall plate at the top here to place that in the correct location. Now we want to place the plywood across the top of the floor, so once again we'll go back to the type selector and pick the plywood component. And now we can just snap that onto the corner of the wall plate here, and we'll use the drag controls to drag it just beyond the crop region. And we can also adjust its thickness here with the drag control, so we'll just drag those up so it snaps to the top of the floor. So that completes the components for the floor. We now need to place the stud in the wall here, so we'll go back to the type selector and we'll choose the 2x4 nominal cut lumber section. And now we need to rotate that around, so we'll press the spacebar on the keyboard, and we can now just snap that into the bottom corner of the wall here to place that timber stud. So next we need to place some plywood sheathing on the outside face of the wall. So let's go back to the type selector and choose the plywood component again. We can see it needs to rotate, so we'll press the spacebar once to turn it around. And now we'll just snap it to the top of the wall and the wall plate here to position it. And then we can use the drag controls to drag it beyond the crop region. And we'll also use the lower drag controls to drag it down so that it overlaps the retaining wall a little. And we can see there we've got a temporary dimension, so let's edit that, and we'll set this to be 4 inches. So we'll click Modify to finish placing the components. And now we want to adjust the thickness of this plywood here, so let's select it. And now looking at the properties palette, we can see we have a thickness parameter here and it's currently 1 inch, so let's change this to be 3/4 of an inch. And then once we apply this, we can see that slightly thinner plywood sheathing that we need for the exterior of our wall. So next we'll place some insulation into the stud wall here. And to do this, we'll go to the Annotate ribbon tab, and from the detail panel, we'll click on the insulation tool. Now looking at the properties palette, we can see we have the insulation width set to be 3 inches, which is the correct size for this location. So we just need to come and snap to the middle of the stud here, and then we can draw this up again just beyond the crop region, and then that places the insulation that we need into the stud wall. We'll click Modify to finish that. And now we need to place the siding on the outside face of the plywood here, and to do this we'll use a repeating detail. So we'll go to the Annotate ribbon tab, and then from the detail panel here we'll click the component drop down and we'll pick the repeating detail component. Now looking at the type selector, we can see we have the repeating detail, so let's click Edit Type to open its type properties. And now looking at the pattern panel here, we can see that we've got the lapse siding detail that's being repeated, and it's repeated at a distance of just over 8 inches here. So let's rename this, so we'll click Rename and we'll call this lapse siding, and then we'll click OK to save that name. And then we'll click OK to close down the type properties. And now we can come and snap to the bottom of the plywood, and we can see as we move our mouse up, that detail just gets repeated. So we can just draw that beyond the crop boundary here and click, and then we have that siding on the outside of our plywood. So now we want to put the pattern onto the topography, and to do that we'll use a field region. So we'll go back to the Annotate ribbon tab, and on the detail panel we'll click Field Region. Looking at the type selector, we can see we have the Earth Pattern Field Region type. Looking at the ribbon tab here, we can see we've got the Line Draw tool enabled. And just beyond that, we can see the line style is currently set to thin lines, so we'll change this to be wide lines. And now we can come and start to draw, so we'll start outside the crop boundary, align it to the wall, and then snap it to the intersection there with the topography. And then we can come across along that topography line and just click outside of the crop region, and then we can close that off. So now we'll click Finish Edit Mode, and we can see that pattern applied, and the lines that are outside of the crop boundary can't be seen. And finally, we just need to place a hidden line to indicate the underside of the joists in the distance. So we'll go to the Annotate Ribbon tab, and now from the Detail panel here, we'll click Detail Lines. Looking at the Place Detail Line ribbon, we can see we've got the Line Draw tool enabled, and the line style is currently Wide Line, so we'll change this to Hidden. And now we can just snap to that top of the wall plate and draw the line beyond the crop boundary once more, and then click Modify to finish that. So that finishes adding the detail to the view, but now we'll just make it look more like a drawing. So from the Properties palette of the view here, we can see we have the crop region visible parameters, so we'll uncheck this so that the crop region is no longer visible, and we'll place some break lines around the detail. So from the Annotate Ribbon tab, on the Detail panel here, we'll click the Detail Component tool. Now from the Type selector, we'll choose the Break Line Detail Component. Now we can just come and place this, and we'll snap this to the top of the view just here. And now we'll turn it through 180 degrees, so we'll press the space bar twice, and now place it at the bottom of the view. And now just on the right side here, so press the space bar once more to rotate it around. We can now just place that on the edge of the detail. And that now completes creating our detailed section.